Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, May 18th, 2021. Time for another show. This attested to by the fact that Bill has given us another morning tweet all the way from Portland, Maine. And how do you like this one? True fact, Kagro X, me. Hi, your host, David Waldman, is so woke. He does his entire radio show while conscious. Amazing. That's called Value for Your Money, partner. And hey, it's all true. I'm barely woke by the time the radio show rolls around. I wake up much earlier than the show goes on to make an attempt at checking through the news and seeing what might be brand new and breaking and worthy of discussion. But that doesn't mean I actually wake up all that well. It takes me a while to do that. And usually by the time the show rolls around, I'm in the late stages of brain fog and saying, oh yeah, I feel like I have to do something at 9 o'clock. I can't put my finger on what it is. But I want to read this article that I just found either recommended by Pocket or floating around on Twitter some morning. And it usually has nothing to do with anything. And then sorting through the news and trying to decide, all right, well, what's really news that needs investigating and what is just stuff floating around that we need to take note of. Stuff like, for instance, the fact that Chris Christie says he won't, quote, defer to anyone, including Trump, in weighing a 2024 presidential bid. Is that important? Do we need to know that? Is there really any likelihood of his breaking through if Trump decides to run? Will Trump decide to run? Is he just too lazy for that and just wants to draw things out and just enjoys the attention? It's so easy to assume that that's actually the case. But I don't know. Speaking of people running that, I guess we should be paying attention to because it's kind of a political show. And so therefore, maybe we have to pay attention to it. Andrew Giuliani says he's going to make a bid for the Republican nomination for governor in New York. And I can't, think of a really good reason why he would do that. He's got no political experience other than working, I guess, in the Trump White House, where he was, as you may recall, the sports liaison, the guy who would invite college championship teams over for hamburgers. That was, that's his job, but whatever, I'll govern New York. And, I guess, to be fair, the current governor of New York is also just the son of a previous politician. But he had some governmental experience beyond, just making arrangements for sports teams to come in and visit. He, had an actual responsibility. He hasn't done great. I mean, is anybody really super happy with his performance as governor? I guess not, but I don't know. But it just sort of occurred to me that it's just one of those things that I guess since we're talking about getting up in the morning and doing your job, why bother at this point? Not only was, his father wasn't governor of New York. His father was mayor of New York City, but then went completely crazy. And some people would say he wasn't all that sane when he was governor or mayor of New York either. But now, of course, his brain is mush and he's sullied the Giuliani name even further. But I guess, the situation is in New York. Now, unlikely that a Giuliani is likely to win statewide election. Certainly nothing in the city at the moment. There are, of course, plenty of Republican voters in New York and particularly upstate. And I guess the thinking is, in all likelihood, you're just not going to win the governorship. But if you run in the Republican primary, you might actually win the Republican primary because to the extent that there are Republican voters in New York, some significant percentage of them are going to be Trump fans, and they may pretty much, you might assume they may automatically vote for you. I mean, it's not a great assumption under normal circumstances, but if you're facing, no prospects of any real significance otherwise, then why not, right? I mean, it's kind of a good grift. You can raise money. You can live your lifestyle off of that money because these guys don't care about anything. So maybe it works. He's 35 years old. What else has he got lined up? I mean, it's not really like he can move into sports marketing necessarily. I suppose. I don't know. The name is Mud, so I don't know what else he's going to do with himself. This is reported in The Hill. He's, there's some comments from him, of course, here. I'm a politician out of the womb. It's in my DNA, he told the paper, which of course means he inherited it from his father. And his father is an insane a-hole and a traitor to the country. So I guess we should assume that DNA is in him too. We're not supposed to assume that sort of blood libel, but, it wasn't my idea. It was although, who knows? A politician out of the womb. So maybe he's talking about placental blood that was shared here. And where's, his mom isn't in nearly as much trouble as his dad is. So maybe there's, who knows? Anyway, the point is, he thinks he's, I guess, got a real shot at this. And he may, because Trump voters, might just really be that lazy. It's, I guess, only a question of whether or not there are more Trump Republicans in New York ready to participate in the primary than other kinds of Republicans. And who knows if there even are other kinds of Republicans. They say they're out there, Liz Cheney, etc., but I don't know. I don't see it. And of course, most of the other people who are likely to run for the nomination also will vie for the Trump sector by saying they're just Trumpier than Giuliani, which will be a little difficult to believe. But, it's their job, not mine. I don't care. I only care if one of these idiots actually makes it to the governor's office. And so to the extent that you can head that off at the pass by eliminating the possibility of one of them winning the primary, go for it. I encourage all New Yorkers to do what they can to make sure that doesn't happen. It's not a big piece of news. It's just an annoying piece of news. And it happened and it's real and we'll report on it. All right, what else have we got here worth sharing? There's a few other stories breaking this morning in the short news item category. Here, a tweeted report from, who is this? Haley Bird Wilt. Do I have that right? Wilt, Wilt? Yeah, I guess so. Who is an associate editor at the Dispatch, I guess, and reporting the following news with a blue check mark and everything. I don't know anything about Haley. That Kevin McCarthy has announced that he won't support the bipartisan compromise worked out for a January 6th commission. Remember when it was going to have, it does have bipartisan support. It just won't include the leader of the House Republican conference. So whatever. I don't know whether that bodes well for it or not. I guess they can pass it in the House, really, I guess, without Republican support. But, even if they have a few extra votes for it, I guess that guarantees its passage. The Senate might go along with it. I don't know whether it matters that much that McCarthy isn't supporting it. I think it's to be expected given that McCarthy was, should be a material witness to the commission. So I don't imagine that he's likely to support it because they'll call him to testify and he won't enjoy that, even if it's not detrimental to his, it doesn't pose any immediate threat to his own freedom. He's not likely to be imprisoned for his role in January 6th, though he perhaps ought to be imprisoned for his role in the aftermath. But that won't be part of the scope of their investigation. But it will make it, of course, very uncomfortable for him. And they'll ask him, these things that you said are on the record. Let's talk about them. And they are things that just got Liz Cheney kicked out as conference chair. So that poses a political problem for him. I guess we'll follow that development closely. We haven't discussed very much, I don't think, about the proposed commission, and that did that come out, the structure of the commission and the agreement among the Republicans and Democrats alike working on putting this proposal together may have come out on Friday. Perhaps it happened on Thursday, and it was just sort of after the show, and we never really got around to it because we were discussing other things with Ian. But yeah, it may have been Thursday because I think we made some mention of it, but it just wasn't all that intriguing. The idea of an evenly divided committee or commission in this case. It's not an internal committee. No, I understand no currently serving members of Congress are permitted to serve on this thing. It's going to be evenly divided by nominations from between Republicans and Democrats, and the congressional leaders are the ones who will be making the nominations, though they can't nominate anybody currently in Congress. There's also some weird rules about the subpoena power. Greg mentioned some of this yesterday, as a matter of fact. It's really, I mean, we should be paying more attention to it and looking at the process. But I guess if it passes, then we'll take a look at the process. I don't know if I have any real interest in trying to work on reshaping how the commission will work, because at this stage, it's set in stone. They think they have a compromise based on a certain kind of agreement, and any deviation from it gives everybody an excuse to jump ship from the agreement to pass the thing, which might not be a terrible thing because it looks like, honestly, I don't know. I had a short discussion on back channel Twitter with Greg Sargent about it. Greg Sargent is a little bit more optimistic about how it's going to come out than I am. I mean, really, honestly, telling me that it's going to be evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans is, it's marked for death at that point. I already start thinking about the super committee and how much time and energy people invested in the idea that was going to work, because it was super, and it did have some sort of extraordinary powers, and this may have some too. But I mean, once you say it's going to be divided evenly between Republicans and Democrats, I don't know how you structure something like that. I mean, you can do it. I don't just know how you get agreement to do it. If you structured it that it's evenly divided, but it doesn't necessarily take a majority to do something, like a minority, so long as they're members of the majority party, can get something done even over the objection of the evenly divided committee and all of their Republicans. Because otherwise, you just have Republicans can deadlock and therefore block anything from happening on a strictly partisan basis, which means that they will do it. And an evenly divided committee, though, to the outside world, and I don't even know why the outside world even thinks this anymore, but I guess to casual observers, that equals fair. Even division equals fair. But it's an investigation of what Republicans did on January 6th. It doesn't really make any sense to me to give them the ability to, you know what I'm saying. It doesn't make any sense to give them veto abilities when they're investigating themselves. Fairness by splitting it evenly makes sense in other, well, it doesn't really make sense in any context, but it could be said to make sense in another context when you're not investigating one of the parties. An evenly divided 9/11 commission makes a certain amount of sense, although even there you had the issue of, are we investigating Republican inaction in the face of, if not ample warning, some warning from the intelligence community that something like this might happen? And I think we could probably all move, if we wanted to, past the idea that, okay, well, true, there were presidential daily briefings, but this was an outrageous and audacious attack of terrorism, and it's difficult to predict such things with specificity. But they came pretty close. And okay, so if you put it past that, at least you're still investigating the activities of the intelligence community and terrorist organizations. Whereas if you are investigating the actions of one of the political parties that's been given an equal number of seats on the commission, I think the conclusion is going to be that that political party was A-okay, or at least not getting in any trouble. So I really don't know that this, that makes any sense to worry about that kind of thing and the composition of the committee and making it evenly divided. The better idea, I guess, if you really wanted to get down to it, was for a presidential commission, so that, at the very least, so that you didn't have to trade off on nominations with anybody. It may still have been the case that the presidential commission was equally divided, more or less, along partisan lines. They clearly would have an eye on outside optics, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, say, their subpoena power depends on having the agreement of one of the parties to the insurrection. Are they going to subpoena Kevin McCarthy if the commission is evenly divided and they are conscientious Republicans still towing the Republican line even now? They're not going to, they're going to say, we don't want to allow for the embarrassment of Republican members still serving in Congress, even though none of us are on the commission are currently serving in Congress. All right, well, that deserves a sip of hot tea, I think, to try and soothe the nerves, but we'll move on from there. We'll probably double back on taking a closer look at the structure of the commission at some point, but there are other fun stories to bring up, some of which relevant to our issues, and some of more esoteric, let's say. The New York Times, for the one from New York, you remember, I don't know, that somehow that just came out as like the New York Times. Specifically, the New York Times, one of their top reporters, who we have all good things to say about, Charlie Savage, reporting this story. Unusual in the era of Republicans as the party of small government, which they really never were and certainly aren't now. The Trump Justice Department tried to use a grand jury to identify a Devin Nunes critic on Twitter. And Devin Nunes has been after his critics on Twitter for a long, long time. And if this is about the cow account, we should just, be done with this guy already. I don't know how this guy survives election, but, these people love to obsess about these things. An unsealed court filing shows that the social media company, Twitter that is, fought the subpoena, which the Biden administration is said to have withdrawn, thankfully. Wise of them to have done. Charlie Savage reporting this yesterday. The Justice Department under President Trump secretly obtained a grand jury subpoena last year in an attempt to identify the person behind a Twitter account dedicated to mocking Representative Devin Nunes of California, according to a newly unsealed court document. But Twitter fought the subpoena, as well as an associated gag order. They put everything on this one. A gag order barring the company from talking about it publicly. Twitter executives raised skepticism about whether the Justice Department might be abusing federal criminal law enforcement power to retaliate against a critic of Mr. Nunes, a Republican who is a close ally of Mr. Trump, in violation of the First Amendment. Comes even before the second one. Ultimately, according to a person familiar with the matter, the Justice Department withdrew the subpoena this spring after President Biden took office. What was going on behind the subpoena remains murky. The filing, a motion to suppress the subpoena and lift the gag order that Twitter filed in March, shows that the Justice Department sent the company a demand on November 24th, well after the election, well after he knew he lost, to provide identifying information about the user. Oh, it's a different one. It's not the cow, at least. Nunes Alt. All one word. ALT, like alternate Nunes, whatever. Twitter appears to have immediately been suspicious about the legitimacy of the request. Good eye. The user of that account, the filing said, appears to be engaged in clear First Amendment activity, discussing stances on current events, government policies, and one elected official in particular, Congressman Nunes. I guess then the subpoena was sought by the people who were constantly screaming things like, the Unite the Right rally was a First Amendment right, and I guess at the start it certainly was, but they're constantly screaming about the need for free speech, and you can't have, Twitter suppressing free speech, and even though Twitter isn't actually capable of First Amendment violations of this sort, because it's not a governmental entity, here is a governmental entity trying to do exactly that and making Twitter do it. Well, consistency and all that. The filing provided examples of some of the account's tweets, so that's good. I'd like to know what he was up to. Such as a photograph of Mr. Nunes with text superimposed over his face that reads, "Believe in conspiracy theories even if there is no evidence." It's not even particularly stinging, but okay. As the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee until Democrats took control of the chamber after the 2018 midterm elections, Nunes used his position to put forward claims that supported Trump's contention that the Russia investigation was a deep state conspiracy against him, of course, right? Twitter's filing also noted that Mr. Nunes and his lawyer had separately filed a series of lawsuits, you remember these, in efforts to unmask pseudonymous, yes, do I have the pseudonymous? I believe I've got the pronunciation right. Social media users who criticized him, including an account that purported to be the congressman's cow and the Nunes alt account. And the cow is the more famous of the two. When Twitter pressed the Justice Department for an explanation, the filing said the government said the subpoena was part of a criminal investigation into possible violations of a federal statute that makes it a felony to use interstate communications to threaten or injure, or rather to threaten to injure someone. But the government refused to point to any particular tweet that made a threat. Yes, seems like they've perhaps over-applied it. The company's filing asked the judge overseeing the matter to take a searching look at the basis for the Justice Department's motivation in going after the users. As the custodian entrusted with the private identifying information that the government seeks, Twitter is concerned the subpoena may not be supported by a legitimate law enforcement purpose, and that therefore there cannot be any need, let alone a compelling need, for the government to unmask the user. A lawyer for Twitter wrote in the court motion. Good job. Good lawyer. Well done. It continued. As such, Twitter asks that the court engage in a searching analysis of the government's bases, I guess here, for issuing the subpoena in order to determine whether the subpoena violates the First Amendment and should be quashed. The grand jury subpoena had been obtained by the Office of the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia. At the time, the office was run on an acting basis, basis by Michael R. Sherwin. I forgot all about that guy, who had been installed by Attorney General William Barr. A spokeswoman for that office did not respond to a request for comment or explanation, including whether the underlying investigation remained open. It's a good question. The text of that subpoena, which was attached to Twitter's court filing, suggested that the inquiry was being run by, this is the interesting part, the Capitol Police, which, of course, protects members of Congress, just, as of late, not all that well. Maybe they're getting better. A spokesman for Mr. Nunes did not respond to a request for comment. The person who operates the Nunes alt account appeared to be surprised by the filing, writing in a post on Monday afternoon that there was, quote, nothing remarkable about me, unquote, and adding, so then why am I being sued by a U.S. congressman? Why would the DOJ ever target me? Is it the mean tweets and bad memes? That may be it, guy. Twitter said in a statement that it was committed to protecting the freedom of expression for those, the freedom of expression, really, of those who use our service. We have a strong track record and take seriously the trust placed in us to work to protect the private information of the people on Twitter. That one could probably use some refining, but we get the idea. So, interesting. Hopefully more developments. And, I guess Nunes turned to the Capitol Police at the time for assistance on it because, of course, he's a member of Congress. It's not wrong for the Capitol Police to have participated in it necessarily. And I did see some tweets this morning suggesting that, maybe that should be viewed in the context of the possibility that some of the Capitol Police were sympathetic to Trump and Trump supporters on January 6th. And that still could be true, of course, but I don't think that it really helps explain why the Capitol Police would agree to participate in this exercise. It was probably at the request of a member of Congress, and he was putting forward what they had. They didn't really have the basis from which to question the legitimacy of Nunes's complaint. That really fell to Twitter, and Twitter did an excellent job with it and framed the issue correctly. And of course, now the election has made the difference. Biden is not going to direct the DOJ to pursue that subpoena, certainly, and probably not even the case, in service to Devin Nunes. There's just no reason to be doing that. It was only happening because Trump, I guess, to the extent that he feels any obligation to anyone other than himself or his family, I guess he felt like this was something that he could do for Devin Nunes that wouldn't cost him any money and wouldn't stand any chance of making Devin Nunes any money either, because he doesn't want to see that happen either. He's a very jealous guy, I think, generally speaking. Trump. All right, time for our first break. That's a sampling of the weirdo quick hit news that's out there. There are a couple other things that we could spend some time on. And it's a good thing, too, because that's the way the show works. There's more time before we have to hand things over. In fact, an hour and a half. So we have material to fill it. And isn't that a relief to know? Well, we'll take 2 minutes to organize it and be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Let's move on to some of the other interesting stories currently floating around. Let's see, where did we leave off? It was the Nunes subpoena. Yes, okay. Plenty more to discuss. Here's one a little bit off the beaten path, but it's certainly political, and certainly in a previous era we might have gone to this one at the top of the show. Just happened to see this curious story circulating, and it's an important one for your mental files because it answers a lingering question, a lingering unstoppable force versus immovable object, chicken versus egg type political brain teaser. And it comes from Shannon Watts, of course, founder of Mom's Demand and currently with Everytown for gun safety. And she brought this story to our attention, although, I don't know, she just, you brought up, didn't examine it in quite the same way that we did, but she's got a more singular focus, perhaps, than we do. But she tweeted the story here from San Antonio, Texas, written up here in the Star Telegram under the, well, how do we tell the story best? Just tell us what Shannon's commentary on it was. A San Antonio man hid in the trunk of a woman's car and then jumped out and started shooting her. Yikes, bad. But she started shooting her as she walked into an abortion clinic, which suggests that perhaps the man hiding in the trunk was hiding in the trunk because he knew that she might be heading to an abortion clinic and that, hey, maybe there's more of a story behind this after all. The gunman knew the woman, and police are investigating the incident as a case of domestic violence. But I think a more specific type of case of domestic violence than Shannon was able to fit in her first tweet anyway. She followed up with another that said, because it's because this is the basics of the story is this. Because it's America, the anti-abortion protester at the clinic where she was trying to go in, and there was a protester there, an anti-abortion protester there, was armed. The permitted gun owner, of course, shot at but failed to shoot the gunman, who it says, as of the time she tweeted this yesterday anyway, still on the loose. I don't know if that's still the case. But here's basically, of course, what's being set up. If you ever wondered, in Texas or anywhere else, whether an armed anti-abortion protester, probably so armed because he would probably say, I fear the violent left attacking me for my pro-life views, which, you always got to look out for yourself, but okay. I don't know how this person was armed and in what manner, whether it was concealed carry, I don't know. Maybe it had nothing to do with anything, but anyway, if you ever wondered whether somebody who was committed enough to just post themselves outside of an abortion clinic to protest and who was armed, and so also bought into the whole, civilian good guy with a gun mythos. So, if you ever wondered what would take precedence, pro-life sentiments, such as they may be, except, generally speaking, if you're carrying a gun, I don't know how super pro-life you are, but you set up the thought experiment, right? What happens if an abortion protester armed at a clinic sees a man try to shoot a woman on her way into the abortion clinic? Now, assuming that the anti-abortion protester makes the assumption, and I guess in this case correct, we haven't read the Star-Telegram article yet to figure it out, that the woman on her way into the abortion clinic is pregnant and seeking an abortion. He's obviously going to want to try to stop her from doing that. Now, we can't assume that he was going to use his gun to try to stop her from doing that. That I don't think anybody has accused anybody of at this stage of the game. I'm sure that there are some people somewhere who have done this, but this particular guy probably, in all likelihood, just armed for his own self-defense, not with the idea in mind that he'll use the weapon to stop women from going in for abortions. That sets up its own brain teaser of, if you are pro-life, how seriously are we supposed to take your threat to the life of this woman with your gun if it's meant to be believed that it's in defense of the unborn life, as you put it, that she's seeking to terminate? Like, why would that be a good trade? Kill somebody, but why do people assassinate abortion doctors? So, it's already out there. Anyway, in this case, what does a supposedly pro-life protester do if he sees a woman heading into an abortion clinic and somebody tries to stop her, but tries to stop her by shooting her? What becomes the more important? Do I ally myself with the obviously anti-abortion gunman? Although, again, that may assume too much. It's not that I'm anti-abortion, I'm just anti this person or this person getting an abortion. Also, I'm crazy and not really somebody you want to ally yourself with. So it's a little shaky from those grounds. But I guess the big question is, does an anti-abortion protester who is armed, seeing someone attacking and shooting a woman on her way in to get an abortion, intervene? What's the stronger impulse? To stay out of it because privacy? Well, no, obviously not. You're an abortion clinic protester. That privacy, for these people doesn't enter into it. Allyship with the crazy person shooting? Maybe. Or the instinct, to say, the desire to have a real live, probably looks pretty good. How's my excuse for using my gun here, essentially, is what I'm asking. Pretty good. On the surface of it, no one's going to question it. There's a clearly bad guy shooting a morally ambiguous woman. in my view. Not mine, his. And I can be a big hero. But it's an interesting thing, too. Like, what would it have done if he had shot the guy and then he goes to the next meeting of the organizing meeting of the anti-abortion protesters at the clinic? Like, does he get Dick Cheney'd out? Like, you shot a guy that was trying to stop a woman from having an abortion. Yes, but by killing her. We're not for that. Oh, yes, we are. I don't know how that discussion comes out. It's a real brain teaser. And, of course, anyway, the answer is exactly what you think it is. It's not really that much of a brain teaser. Duh. Obviously, the guy is going to go and use his gun because that's the most important thing in all of this. I have a gun. I've been carrying it around since forever. I never have a chance to use it and look like a hero, and I'm going to do it. Anyway, he fires and he misses. Now, the topper to this story didn't actually happen. Like, the only way the story gets any better is he shoots and misses, and he kills a, amputee Iraq veteran preacher in the, who was helping orphans in the background. But it doesn't happen. He doesn't hit anybody. He doesn't hit the attacker. There's no discussion as far as I can tell so far. No discussion in Twitter anyway of, a bullet missed. It was in the middle of the city of San Antonio, which has its own problems with gun violence. Now there's a stray bullet flying in an area where I guess there's probably some heightened tensions as it is because there are abortion protests going on. But nothing happens, and nobody cares to look into it either. And instead, we now puzzle over whether or not this was a righteous intervention or not. Let me see what they have to say here in the Star Telegram. Gunman hides in woman's trunk, shoots at her, as she enters women's clinic, Texas cops say. And I guess there's really just no marksman involved in the whole story. Dawson White is the reporter. Story goes like this. Police in Texas are searching for a man. Still looking for him. Can't find this guy. That they say shot a woman as she was walking into a reproductive health clinic on Saturday. Everybody's avoiding all the upsetting terms here. The man hid in the woman's trunk as she drove to Alamo Women's Reproductive Center, police said. WOAI reported. And I still don't understand how there's some Texas outlets that are W's and some that are K's, but we'll get into it on another day. The man hid in the woman's trunk, right? So again, it's sort of like, why would a random guy hide in her trunk? Come on, who is this guy? I think they know. Anyway, when she arrived around 8:30 a.m., the man jumped out of the trunk, and you guess you can do that because they have those safety devices in there. Thank God for the safety devices that make it possible for a gunman locked in your trunk to leap out and try and kill you before you try and kill someone else. You see, this is all done from an anti-abortion standpoint. But don't worry, it comes out okay because another person tries to kill that guy, but none of it works. I don't know. But the latch in the trunk worked, and that's good news. And the guns worked properly. They just don't know how to use them very well. All right, so she arrives at 8:30. The man jumps out of the trunk, starts firing shots, missing the woman, but hitting several of the clinic's windows. So RIP to those windows, I guess. There's stray bullets everywhere in this, and they're of less than secondary concern. That's interesting, too. So the clinic's windows get shot. Police said that, too. This is a very poorly... I'm doing a bad job reading the article, but I don't think it's all that eloquently written. Like the last paragraph ended with police said, comma. Pardon me, can I divert your attention for just a second from all this? The man hid in the woman's trunk as she drove to the Alamo Women's Reproductive Center, comma, police said. Normally we end it there, right? But no, because the Star Telegram didn't have, I guess, who's the reporter? Dawson White wasn't there. He had to ask everybody else. And he wants to credit people properly, but it ends up being written like, okay, the guy hid in the woman's trunk. She drove to the center, comma, police said, comma, WOAI reported. Police said it, but I didn't even hear him say it. I missed the whole event. I wasn't there to report on it. Who would be? I also didn't ask the police, but WOAI did. And I heard them ask, so that's how, that's how it gets reported. The man hid in the trunk, said police, according to WOAI. All right, next up, ready for more crack reporting here. When she arrived at 8:30 a.m., the man jumped out of the trunk and started firing shots, missing the woman but hitting several of the clinic's windows, police said. And that's who would say it, right? But this time, They said it according to KSAT. And now we're back at the problem of WOAI is reporting it. KSAT is reporting it. It's just not me at the Star Telegram reporting it. Everybody else is reporting what they talked to police about. That's what's happening. Officials referred to the facility as an, quote, abortion clinic, unquote, which, I mean, I guess it is, which is why they probably referred to it that way. But who knows? Maybe, Alamo Women's Reproductive Center could be anything, I suppose. But it certainly suggests that it's an abortion clinic, among other things you can get done there. A person who was protesting outside the building pulled a gun and fired at the shooter in an attempt to protect the woman. This is great, too. You'll never believe this one. Oh, my God. A person who was protesting outside the building pulls a gun, fires at the shooter in an attempt to protect the woman, police said, KENS reported. So, what's your job? I listen to the radio and television a lot. I mean, I guess that's my job. So, that's not funny. Anyway, it looks funnier in print than it is on the radio, somehow. Okay. Anyway, that overlooks the whole dynamic that we read the story for, which is that it's an attempt to protect the woman. Whereas, if the gunman, see, this is all the gunman in the trunk's fault. If the gunman in the trunk hadn't used the safety latch to jump out of the trunk, the safety latch, for safety, to jump out to try to murder somebody, then I wouldn't have been interested in protecting the woman at all. In fact, it was my intention to accost her on her way into the abortion clinic. And P.S., I'm armed for unknown reasons. It's still unknown at this point. And so what really, one way of looking at it here is, well, I got up early in the morning to come here to protest abortion, and I was going to accost this woman. I didn't know this woman in particular was arriving. But this other guy used inside information to jump my claim and accost her before I could accost her on her way into the abortion clinic. Now, granted, he attempted to kill her, but he did so by shooting the windows of the abortion clinic. It wasn't his intention to shoot the windows. He was trying to get her, I guess. I mean, if they ever catch him, he'll say it was a warning shot. So who knows? But anyway, the real point is, I don't know if there's any good guys in this story. Guys, anyway. So, okay. According to the police, according to another outlet, this outlet says that that's what happened. You get it? The shooter then ran off. Police aren't sure whether the man was struck by the bullet, according to the outlet. So he may have missed, he may not have missed, but that's an interesting way of putting it. Like, now that's exciting. He may be wounded and bleeding somewhere, and that might help us track him down. Or the story may be the bullet went on to kill somebody else and we haven't figured that out yet. Or it went somewhere and nobody called the police and said they had been shot. So what do we care? It's embedded in the, in the headboard of some baby's crib somewhere across the street. But F it. The kid's not dead, so it's not news, right? Moving along. It's a gun battle in the middle of San Antonio. But there you have it. The shooter ran off. Police aren't sure whether the man was struck, according to the outlet. That would be KENS. So once again, we get our, the news is from other people. KNS, everybody's back in this one. Ready? And all this, I guess this reporter did is mix up the order in which he quoted various other, he's an aggregator. Maybe that's not so bad. It's, if it was a blog, we'd understand. The woman was taken to police headquarters and was said to be shaken up but uninjured, per KENS. The protester had a license to carry a firearm, police said, but the reporter this time doesn't tell us which outlet told them that police said that. May still be KENS. He had a permit, but he just doesn't use the gun very well. He shot and missed. Maybe he doesn't deserve the permit. Officials don't believe the clinic was the target, even though they were the only one shot here, and no one inside was injured, even though the bullets came through the window. KSAT reported. The shooter's gun, now, the shooter in this case, the negative connotation shooter, the gunman, the bad guy with the gun, that's the one trying to shoot the woman, we think. But he missed all the time. So we're not positive. There are two shooters here. But we don't call the second one the shooter. One's the shooter and one's the hero, even though both shot their guns, but nobody shot anybody. So maybe they're, in fact, maybe the so-called good guy might be the only one to hit anybody, but we don't know. All right. The shooter, bad guy shooter's gun was found at the scene along with a piece of clothing, according to WOAI. Thanks, WOAI. A piece of clothing. You cracked it. You did it. The case cracker. A piece of clothing. Maybe they can use it to track the guy down, but, I don't know. Is it bad to say what kind of clothing it is? It was a gimp suit. That's the problem. No one wants to talk about that. I don't know what it was. This is a piece of clothing. My frustrations are taking us further afield here. Police used a helicopter and K9 units to try to find the suspect, but he's still on the loose, the outlet reported. Officials said the shooter knew the woman, you would think. He locked himself in her trunk. He knew the woman and all about her car. Although that doesn't ever say that the trunk was locked. This is true. I don't know. Maybe he rigged it up in some other way. I wouldn't trust one of those things, even with the safety latches. Officials said the shooter knew the woman, and police are investigating the incident as a case of domestic violence, according to KSAT. So there you have it. Thanks, KSAT and WOAI and KENS, for figuring out what to tell the Fort Worth Star-Telegram about this incident. It's a little convoluted, but anyway, so there you go. I mean, that's a long time to spend on something that you knew the answer to. The puzzle being what wins out here, and the answer always is guns. I just thought you might be interested in figuring that one out. Okay, let's see. Other ideas of interest. Let me see. Let me click on this thing because I read this thing yesterday and I thought it was interesting enough to put aside, even though it is it was a long tweet thread now compiled into not Thread Reader app, but a different similar app by Cory Doctorow, who had a lot to say about this very interesting topic, particularly of taxation and pay-fors, or pay-go as they call it on Capitol Hill in government. But this very interesting take on things that contains a lot of echoes of modern monetary theory. And I forget exactly how this came to my attention, but now did I save the tweet as well? Because it was kind of interesting just as tweets, but I think I put it away as this thread. But expressing ideas that we've discussed in the past with Arliss Bunny and others when we've been discussing modern monetary theory, and we might as well remind you of them. This very interesting tweet thread now put together, I guess, as a mini article. Pay-go, false consciousness, and the IRS. Might as well just divert attention from things with this. John Steinbeck, it begins, diagnosed an important American pathology in 1966 when he called the U.S. a nation of, quote, temporarily embarrassed capitalists, people who see themselves as the wealthy in waiting and therefore fight policies that reduce the power that comes from wealth. We've danced around the idea quite a few times, or people, the idea of people voting against their own interests in order to protect the interests of the wealthy, on the idea that one day they too may be wealthy. And if that doesn't convince you, then I guess that's what trickle-down economics was invented for. Eventually, you'll get a piece of that wealth as it trickles down through the economy. Neither of those two are particularly effective strategies. It's a restatement, he says, of Engels's idea of false consciousness, and it's the result of a deliberate strategy on the part of wealthy people, many of whom believe that they were literally genetically destined to be wealthy. Some people think divinely destined to be wealthy, to convince the rest of us that, quote, anyone can succeed. And I guess that's something you would have to come up for. If you believed you were genetically or divinely destined to be wealthy, and you figured you needed people's help, politically, you need a majority behind you to protect your wealth, Well, if you think it's genetic or divine destiny that you're wealthy, there's really no reason to believe that the people that you're going to be recruiting for that job will ever become wealthy either. So instead you come up with the alternative thesis that, hey, anybody can succeed. You are all just pre-wealthy in the land of opportunity, even though I don't actually personally believe that. But you have to project that idea so that people will back you up at the polls. Anyway, part of the false consciousness program is the money story that goes like this. And here's where we get into modern monetary theory. The U.S. government takes away taxpayers' money from makers to fund programs, the bulk of which go to the lazy takers who experience the moral hazard of subsidized unemployment. But of course, we say of course because we believe in modern monetary theory, he says of course that's not how money works. That's what Arliss teaches us. Money originates with the federal government and its fiscal agents, the banks. In order for the public to have money to pay off its tax liabilities, the government must first spend that money into existence, the Federal Reserve, etc., right? The IRS doesn't take our tax dollars, pile them up, and give them to Congress to spend on programs. When the IRS taxes our money, they annihilate it, removing it from circulation. When Congress spends, new money comes into existence. And I think there are some classical economists that would argue with whether or not that's actually new money. But it's an interesting concept and helps explain the basics of, or it's very similar anyway, if not overlapping entirely with MMT. The U.S. government, this part does overlap, the U.S. government can't run out of money any more than Apple can run out of iTunes gift cards. That, I think, is an excellent way of thinking about it. It can spend too much money so that prices go up because there are too many dollars now chasing too few goods, but it can't run out of money. Federal spending is constrained by resources, that is, what's for sale in dollars, what's out there to be bought, not money, that is, how many dollars there are. Federal spending is constrained by resources, not money. If the ratio of dollars to resources gets out of whack, there's a risk of inflation. And we've been talking about the possibility of inflation lately and the overblown worries about it, perhaps. There are many ways to fix this ratio. For example, the government can, or usually does, issue treasury bills, savings bonds, whenever it spends more than it taxes. When you buy a treasury bill, you take dollars that might circulate around the economy, chasing goods and labor, and sequester them. A treasury bill is just a dollar that you're not allowed to spend. In exchange for surrendering the right to spend your dollars for 1, 5, 10, or more years, the government offers you interest, trickling out that money over a long period. That way, the government can buy things today without bidding against your dollars. It's not that they need to raise the money in order to then bid it back out. They just don't want to bid against your money still in circulation. That's another interesting way of thinking of things. But that's not the only way to fight inflation while spending new money into existence. The other major way is taxation, simply removing money from the economy and then annihilating it. Taxation fights inflation. When the government runs a deficit, that means it has created more money this year via spending than it destroyed via taxes. The government deficit is really the public surplus, the money that's left in the economy for all of us to spend on stuff. Likewise, when the government runs a surplus, that means it taxes more money out of existence than it spends into existence. In a year where the government runs a surplus, it means that the power of the private sector, you and me, to buy stuff has decreased overall. This is fine if there was too much money to begin with, if inflation was kicking off. But if there's not enough money in circulation, e.g., if there's a recession, it just makes things worse, but not for everyone. When the economy is starved of money, banks go to work creating new money through loans. These loans pay interest to rich people like bank shareholders and people who securitize and buy debt. That's the 1-2 punch of spending cuts during a downturn, right? Well, that's why it's a bad idea, austerity in those downturns. The real economy is starved of the capital that it needs to pay workers and make things for workers to buy. And the financial economy grows as desperate real economy firms borrow from banks to keep the lights on. Despite all their talk of spending taxpayers' money, the wealthy understand how money works. That's why they were totally indifferent to running the $1 trillion a year deficits created by the Trump tax cuts, and likewise about the Obama finance bailouts. Giving money to rich people causes asset bubbles, driving up the price of houses, for instance, but not inflation, which is a sustained rise in the price of all goods. That's because rich people can't buy enough stuff. That is like fridges and cars and oranges, as he cites here. You can't buy enough stuff by themselves to drive up prices. After you've bought 3 houses and 3 Sub-Zero fridges and filled them with the beef of 3 Kobe cows and 3 cases of Moët, there's still a lot left over, even if you're Jeff Bezos and buy a super yacht with its own smaller super yacht in attendance, right? Did you hear that story? Those leftovers go to socially useless things like buying houses to turn into rent-generating slums, for instance. Wall Street is fast becoming America's biggest landlord, and single-family homes these days are sold for cash to investment funds instead of to families. And they go to influence campaigns designed to make regular people defend massive cuts to the IRS and opposition to public spending on infrastructure, etc. We'll examine the IRS angle after this. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Just trying to see if I can track down the provenance of how this tweet thread came to my attention, but no luck in the 1-minute break. Anyway, continuing on where we left off, we began to speak about the IRS and funding of the IRS and all of this, and I figured this might be a good use for the this next segment prior to hearing from Joan in the last segment, if all is going according to plan. She might be interested in the IRS story because it is a major political angle on the day. The proposal on the table from the Biden administration to vastly increase funding for the IRS so that it is capable of, achieving what ought to be one of its primary missions, making sure everyone pays their fair share of taxes so that, in the traditional thinking, so that there's plenty of money around for paying for government programs. But of course, we're working in MMT mode, and the the various benefits of additional higher marginal tax rates on the wealthy are justified for completely different reasons there. And I think Doctorow stays inside of MMT thinking and reasoning, or or some facsimile of it, in the balance of this tweet thread. So where we left off was, we were talking about one of the dangers of insufficiently taxing super wealth, essentially, was, first of all, that the cash left in their hands and left in circulation in the real economy tend then to go to socially useless spending. Super yachts, buying additional houses not in order to either occupy them yourself or sell them to other families who intend to occupy them, but rather to make financial vehicles of them and sell them to investment funds that can, who knows, no one even knows. It doesn't even matter, I guess, in the first transaction. But it runs up the price of the real estate and keeps it out of the hands of families who might otherwise seek to use it because it prices them out of the market. But in addition, one of the worst socially useless ends for excess cash is that they go to pay for campaigns, not necessarily directly for political campaigns for public office, but that can certainly be part of it, but issue campaigns and, of course, actual elective campaigns for people who would champion these issues, designed to make regular people defend massive cuts not only to tax rates for the wealthy, but to the IRS, and opposition to public spending on infrastructure, education, health, and other necessities. This isn't just about Republicans, and this is a good point. For years, the Democratic leadership has supported, quote, balanced budgets, mostly because they've been embarrassed into it, because there was this originally the popularity of the balanced budget idea with conservative populists attracted a lot of attention, and of course the Reagan Revolution made it seem like that's where the American people were, and they had been convinced to go there by these sorts of public influence campaigns. Well, you should think of the federal budget like you think of your kitchen table budget. You sit down and you plan, and you can't spend more than you take in, and all these things just not really true of a sovereign government with fiat currency. But that made a lot of sense because most people sitting around the kitchen table thinking things like, geez, Ronald Reagan is a great guy, he ought to be president, or thank God he is president, or what have you, don't think about issues like, what does it mean to be able to issue your own currency? It's sort of beyond their interest area, if not their understanding necessarily. But okay, as he was saying, this isn't about Republicans. For years, the Democratic leadership has supported balanced budgets, spending so little, that is, that no new money is left in the economy after all taxes are paid. That's the modern monetary theory view of a balanced budget, means spending so little money that the government doesn't create any new money net in the economy after all taxes are paid. The pay-go rule, which requires all new spending to be matched with cuts or tax hikes, is religion for the likes of Pelosi and Schumer. That's why the Democratic caucus is mired in stupid arguments about how we will pay for things like the stimulus. As bad as the pay-go rule is, though, Republicans have made it worse by demonizing and starving the IRS. Pay-go means that the U.S. government operates under the artificial constraint of only spending if it can make cuts or raise taxes. Raising taxes, of course, really unpopular for obvious reasons. Now, raising taxes on the 1% who have a lot of excess money that's fueling political corruption and asset bubbles is one way around this. Theoretically, taxing the 1% should have a 99% approval rating. But, well, I guess the real question, why doesn't it? Because canny Republicans have figured out how to exorcise, with an O, exorcise, temporarily embarrassed capitalists about the unfairness of taxing their bosses, in part by just flat out lying about who new taxes would implicate. I guess also in part by saying, well, trickle down, give it to us and we'll create jobs with it and give those jobs to you and pay you more money than you really deserve somehow, or more than you might otherwise demand. I don't know what the idea is supposed to be, or just some amount is enough for most people. Anyway, but more importantly, they just flat out lie about who new taxes would implicate. They just say, well, that'll hit you, middle class families. It'll hurt hardworking American farmers. Well, it won't. It's just, that's not who we're taxing here. But there's yet another way to satisfy pay-go's artificial constraint without changing a single word in the tax code. There's an extraneous word in this code here, a way to satisfy pay-go's artificial constraint without changing a single word in the tax code. Simply fund the IRS so that it can collect the trillions that the ultra-wealthy illegally avoid in tax payments every year. But this strategy is also a bust. The GOP campaign to destroy the IRS has been too successful. It's a long-running campaign, but it achieved liftoff in 2013 when the Tea Party baselessly accused the IRS of discriminating against conservative groups seeking nonprofit status. You remember this story, and the various scapegoats of it, like Sherrod, right? Was it Shirley Sherrod or Sherry? I can't remember now. The work the ref strategy paid off, providing political cover for deep cuts to the IRS and putting IRS staffers on notice so they, instead, greenlit every dark money group that applied for nonprofit status, no matter how obviously corrupt they were. You may remember this story, and if you don't, a Washington Post link is provided herein to the December 17th, 2017 story, Fallout from Allegations of Tea Party Targeting Hamper IRS Oversight of Nonprofits. Just one way in which the attack has manifested itself. After the cuts, the IRS grew easier to discredit. Understaffed and under siege, the agency's behavior grew erratic, then indefensible. There were runaway automated processes that sent out erroneous property seizure notices, for instance, that no one could rescind. Illustrated here with a link about that story from 2019 in The Intercept. There was the aftermath of the Equifax breach, where the IRS first told Americans that it didn't matter because they'd already been doxxed by other bad companies. Another link here to a story from The Hill about that. Then came the news that the IRS couldn't cancel Equifax's no-bid $7.5 million anti-fraud contract because it didn't have the resources to do its own fraud prevention. Equifax eventually lost the contract, he says, because it served malware from its anti-fraud site. So that ain't good either. The rich, of course, waged a successful all-out war on the IRS. Take the Global High Wealth Unit inside the IRS. For every hour that an auditor from the Global High Wealth Unit worked, they brought in $4,500 in taxes that the super rich had dodged. Even by the topsy-turvy logic of government as a business, this was good business. After a concerted harassment and political influence campaign, the Global High Wealth Unit abandoned the super rich and switched to the merely wealthy, bringing in less money, but also pissing off a lot more people, because there's a lot more merely wealthy people than super rich, right? The other shoe dropped in 2019, when the IRS admitted it had switched to preferentially auditing poor people because it was too politically and legally fraught to audit rich people, even the most flagrant cheaters. You saw how that, warped ideology came to be. If you audit poor people, that you'll net less money for each audit because they're poor. They have less money. But they'll fight back less because they're poor. They don't have any money to pay lawyers to fight the IRS. So we'll win smaller amounts of money from poorer people and avoid the hassle of going after people who actually are major tax cheats because it's too expensive to chase them. And although we ought to be able to do that and spare no expense, because we are, after all, the government, we've been convinced that no, both for budgetary reasons and for ideological reasons, anti-taxation reasons, we should starve the IRS's budget. What a backward outcome that was. That, too, backed up with a link this time from ProPublica. The headline there being, IRS, sorry, but it's just easier and cheaper to audit the poor, was that headline. That was the first year that America's 400 highest earners paid a lower tax rate than the average American worker. That according to a link provided here from the New York Times. The IRS's transformation into a facilitator of illegal wealth retention by the super rich and petty harassment of the rest of Americans made them very easy to hate, right? Even more easy to hate than usual. To that, add the concentrated corporate campaigns to use the IRS to rip off workers. What's this about? Here's an example. For 20 years, Intuit, the company that makes tax preparation software, right? Intuit lobbied the IRS for 20 years not to make tax filing automatic, painless, and free, ensuring instead that Americans would continue to pay billions to send data to the IRS that it already had. You've surely run into this before, right? Why do I have to, why am I getting in trouble for filling out these income tax forms, these very confusing income tax forms wrong, when you might ask, you're suing me, IRS, for not correctly reporting my income. Now, if you already knew what my income was, which you do, I mean, we report that, our employers report that information to you all the time. If you already knew what my income was, what was the point of my having to fill out this form to declare to you what my income was? Now, if I make a mistake, or if I do it on purpose, you charge me and file a lawsuit against me, or I can be charged criminally for lying about the amount of money I make. But what's the point of lying about the money I make if you already know? Actually, the better question is, what's the point of my being given the opportunity to lie to you at all if you already know how much money I make? And, part of the answer is that Intuit sells software designed to make the intentionally complex task of filling out your tax forms easier. And people want easier. They're willing to spend whatever, $20, $25. I don't know how much is it. Maybe it's $100 to get these, to get tax preparation software. So Intuit is happy that you are tearing your hair out over this stupid situation. They don't care. Whereas simple government, running the government like a business, for instance, not that business is any great shakes at any of this stuff, would probably have dictated, well, why don't we simply say we already have this information and not burn millions of person hours all around the country elsewhere, private citizens wasting more of their time for no reason, and also paying a private company for the privilege of doing it electronically versus by hand, and simply say, we already know. And if you have any other outside income that's not being reported by an employer, then fine, fill out the forms and send it to us. But if you don't. Well, anyway, that's an infuriating story, illustrated for you if you want it more in depth, also by ProPublica in another link herein offered. Reading the IRS's internal emails from this battle, that is the 20-year lobbying from Intuit, I guess, reveals an agency in retreat where demoralized and ineffectual government employees simply rolled over for one of the greatest rip-offs in American history. Intuit wanted to rip us off with taxes. Microsoft, by contrast, just wanted to break the law. How so? Working with KPMG, the convicted monopolist, Microsoft, created a transfer scheme of breathtaking illegality, using its tax savings to bankroll its war on the IRS. Another ProPublica article explains this. The IRS decided to get tough against Microsoft, but Microsoft got tougher. That's their headline. Which brings us to today, where Democrats are held hostage to the pay-for rule and trying to figure out how to mobilize the trillions Biden has pledged for infrastructure, health, and healthcare. Republicans, I don't know why they list those things twice, but okay. Republicans pushing the big lie of taxpayer money, in quotes, are dog whistling hard. Senator John Thune, responding to Biden's proposal for $80 billion for the IRS, says any tax enforcement efforts must strike an appropriate balance between taxpayer responsibilities and taxpayer rights. I don't even really know exactly what that's supposed to mean. Meanwhile, Senator Chuck Grassley takes the nonsensical position that funding the IRS won't help it do its job. Why? Because of this old canard. Simply throwing money at a problem doesn't necessarily yield a solution. Not necessarily, but sometimes it does. Then there's Representative Kevin Brady, warning that a fully funded IRS would, quote, unleash tens of thousands of new IRS agents on families, farms, and businesses. Yeah, of course, fully funded, they might say, well, the most logical place for our efforts is where the Global High Wealth Unit used to be. $4,500 return for an hour's work. We're not paying those people $4,500 an hour. That's just good business. But no, I'm sure they'll go after family farms and businesses. And you know what, though? It works as a political line because most Americans have just witnessed the IRS do exactly that because they were forced to do it by the realities of the expenses of the court system when they were underfunded. You've got to go after people who won't fight back. Now that we have enough funding to go after people who will fight back, though, there's really no reason to believe that they'll stick around scraping the bottom of the barrel. But the Democrats own the pay-go rule, not the Republicans, and their leadership have added their own special touch to make funding the IRS impossible. This with a link to the prospect. According to the rules Congress gives to the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, which calculates the cost of government programs, according to the rules Congress gives the CBO isn't allowed to factor in the projected additional revenue from funding the IRS, only the cost of doing so, which means that they must factor in the salaries that the IRS global high wealth auditors will draw, but they are forbidden from counting the $4,500 per hour that they generate when they puncture the tissue-thin financial lies of the super rich. The pay-for and taxpayer money are lies. It's a shuck sold to the rubes, not economics. Because it's a shuck, it doesn't have to make any sense. And it doesn't. We shouldn't run the government like a business, but if we must, let's at least count revenues as well as costs. I think that's a pretty interesting take on things, and I think entirely consistent with the modern monetary theory view of things, even though it doesn't explicitly say that's where it's coming from. Interesting, to say the least. And of course, that fight rages on, both in the form of the fight to fully fund the IRS and the Republican pushback against it, and the pay-go concept in general, which is as much a stumbling block to good and necessary legislation as the filibuster and the continued resistance to reform or elimination of the filibuster by the likes of Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and possibly others, even if they were to get out of the way. Shouldn't ignore that possibility. Somebody else might like to play kingmaker or broker on that. Let's see. A couple other things that we really ought to get to. One or two very interesting ones, but one I think that we have done wrong to ignore here, and we'll jump down to that. Although I want to note for the record, the Washington Post's reporting from, was it yesterday? Yes, dated yesterday. Chinese businessman with links to Steve Bannon, the one on whose yacht he was arrested, remember that, is driving force for a sprawling disinformation network, researchers say. I think we're going to need to give that one some more time. Both of the articles I'm choosing between need more time than we have to give it. But this one I want to at least acknowledge is out there. The one that I acknowledged was out there the other day but didn't get to read any of. Also of great importance this time from the New York Times, and you've probably spent some time over the weekend reading about it because it was a Friday story. I think so. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That must have been a Thursday story. So you had the full weekend, including Friday, if you count that, to read it. Activists and ex-spy said to have plotted to discredit Trump, quote, enemies in government. You know, deep state people. The campaign included planned operations against President Trump's national security advisor at the time. Say that again. Operations against the national security advisor. That at the time was H.R. McMaster, and FBI employees, according to documents and interviews. Adam Goldman and Mark Mazzetti's piece here from the 13th, end of last week. A network of conservative activists aided by a British former spy, and there's British former spies all over the place these days, mounted a campaign during the Trump administration to discredit perceived enemies of President Trump inside the government, according to documents and people involved in the operations. The campaign included a planned sting operation, oh boy, against Trump's national security advisor at the time, H.R. McMaster, and secret surveillance operations against FBI employees aimed at exposing anti-Trump sentiment in the Bureau's ranks. The operations against the FBI, run by the conservative group Project Veritas. Yes, James O'Keefe. As soon as I said sting operation, you probably guessed. They were conducted from a large home in the Georgetown section of Washington that rented for $10,000 per month. Female undercover operatives arranged dates with the FBI employees with the aim of secretly recording them making disparaging comments about Trump. In other words, classic James O'Keefe. Every operation James O'Keefe runs, for the most part, I guess no surprise for the skipper of the SS Dildo, of course, that somehow every operation involves him trafficking, essentially, in young women, trying to set honey traps for people because he thinks everybody falls for that for some reason. Some strange reason he thinks everybody can be manipulated this way, which is a pretty good hint. Like, I guess if you ever want to take down James O'Keefe, that's the way to do it. There's your projection for the day. I don't know if anybody really wants to dabble in that. But anyway, that always seems to be the case, even from his big breakthrough thing where he was, filmed himself dressed as a pimp, parading around with women dressed, I guess, as prostitutes, and then changing into normal street clothes to go and do his sting operation. But again, it involved him as pimp and setting up stings. And of course, you may remember why I call him the skipper of the SS Dildo, one of his most infamous operations, which actually rose to the level of plotting the drugging and kidnapping of a reporter and to transport her onto, or was it to get her there, or was it after she got there? Didn't he lure her in with the promise of an interview, come meet me on my houseboat? And then he outfitted the whole, again, like a perverted teenager's idea of how he was going to make this operation work. He was going to soften her up and win her over by displaying sex toys all over some sort of weird houseboat sex lair. And the problem was that he lured in an actual adult who said, what kind of perverted teenage world have I walked into? I'm getting the hell out of here. Anyway, back to the story. The campaign shows the obsession that some of Mr. Trump's allies had about a shadowy deep state trying to blunt his agenda, and the lengths that some were willing to go to try to purge the government of those believed to be disloyal to the president. Subtext here is, how far are some of these idiots willing to go? So far that they would actually trust James O'Keefe to help them run this so-called operation. But again, the subtext here, the big story underlying all of this is, once again, thank God that the Trump administration was full of incompetent morons, because if they hadn't been, some really, really serious damage and some really serious internal civil war could have broken out. Central to the efforts, according to interviews, was Richard Seddon, a former undercover British spy who was recruited in 2016 by the security contractor Eric Prince to train Project Veritas operatives to infiltrate trade unions, Democratic congressional campaigns, and other targets. He ran field operations for Project Veritas until mid-2018, and I think I recall seeing that story when it first broke, the idea that they were bringing in this serious professional to turn their stupid, amateurish, but annoying operation into something, I guess also more professional, but I guess it never got anywhere. Except they just kept paying him, so he kept working with them to try to do this. Last year, the New York Times reported that Seddon ran an expansive effort to gain access to the unions and campaigns and led a hiring effort that nearly tripled the number of the group's operatives, according to interviews and deposition testimony. He trained operatives at the Prince Family Ranch in Wyoming. By the way, before we go into our break, Barbara Ladine makes an appearance in this story.
Hi everyone, it's me, Gil. Minimal contributor to content, but regular contributor to funding for Kagro in the morning. Let's change things up from David's so very tired plea for your contributions with a plea of my own. If you want to add your voice to the show, do it. Record your own segment using your favorite recording device and send it to David. Read an article and give your opinion. Write your own essay and read that. The sky's the limit. Well, not really. Try to keep it relatively short so David doesn't have to stress about cutting it and hurting your feelings. Join the hallowed ranks of Greg Dworkin and Joan McCarter and be part of this somewhat witty deep dive into political topics with unnecessary censoring. Lend your voice to the show by sending it to kagrox@gmail.com. KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Joan McCarter has joined us during the break, and I think just to finish up on my own discussion of it, but I think we may stick with at least some of these stories. I mentioned on the way out, I just wanted to get her name in there, Barbara Ladine, maybe a name that rings a bell for you, and there could be any number of reasons why. Barbara Ladine is, I think, like the Forrest Gump, or the, I guess, the Zelig of bad Republican plots, particularly deep state plots. Well, first of all, I think through most of this was working for, is it Chuck Grassley, Joan, that she worked for? Do you know?
Yeah, the Senate Judiciary.
Yes.
I think Grassley, I don't know if she was on his personal staff. I think just Judiciary Committee staff.
Yeah. But he may, at that point he was in control of the hiring of the staff. So he parked her there with a legit government job while she...
And last I saw, it's unclear that she's still in this job. She's supposedly retired, but they asked at Judiciary and nobody was sure. So,
like, that's a yes or no. Have you retired?
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, that's an indication of A, something weird is going on, and B, something weird may have been going on the whole time. Like, how do you not know? Does she show up? No. Did she show up when we thought she wasn't retired? No. Also, that's weird. Was this a no-show job? Maybe. Occasionally she showed. I don't know. So now they got to look. But Barbara Ladine inserts herself in everything. I think the last time we were talking extensively about Barbara Ladine, it was because, again, while working for the Judiciary Committee, she had involved herself in that angle of the very weird plot where she, threw her lot in with some shadowy millionaires who were funding the drive for Hillary Clinton's missing emails.
Yeah.
And, I mean, whatever. And I guess, I'm sure she justified both in her mind by saying, well, we need to find these emails. That's an investigative thing. I'm on the Judiciary Committee. The FBI should be looking for those things, and they're not. And here in this case, well, I suspect that they weren't looking for those things, not because they didn't exist or they weren't incriminating even if they did exist, but because they're all secretly against Trump. So I'm going to launch with James O'Keefe a investigation into who in the FBI is secretly anti-Trump and therefore not helping me with my other stupid investigation of the non-existent Hillary Clinton emails. I must know, so I'm going to team up with the guy who is going to try to traffic in young women to lure FBI agents, presumably during dates or in the throes of passion, that they were going to say, I don't know what, I forget your name, but I got to tell you about Hillary Clinton's emails during sex immediately. And why I don't know how that was supposed to happen, but I guess that also tells us a little bit about what maybe constitutes pillow talk for James O'Keefe. Like, if you're going on a date with the guy and he offers to bring you home.
Expectations.
Yeah, right. First of all, you're being recorded. And second of all, yeah, the pillow talk is going to be about Hillary Clinton. She'd be locked up. All right. Well, anyway, he's a weird guy. Barbara Ladine, like a grown woman, supposedly a professional, et cetera, keeps throwing her lot in, not only with him, but other weirdos who are just sure that, Hillary Clinton did something evil, and they were on the verge of uncovering it, but the only reason they didn't uncover it was further corruption, and now they need to launch an investigation of that further corruption, which they imagine blocked them from their investigation of the imaginary emails. And all the while, this is paid for, her house that she does this plotting in, paid for with, I guess if you're a modern monetary theorist, money created by the government. But for the rest of you, taxpayer dollars. And there we'll resurrect the concept of taxpayer dollars to incriminate Barbara Ladine. I'm happy to do that. Barbara Ladine, thankfully we no longer have to deal with Barbara Comstock here in Northern Virginia. But Comstock, now out of office, thankfully, but has been a big anti-Trumper. Big-ish. Nobody's a big anti-Trumper, I guess. And still out there doing the same and taking, say, Liz Cheney's side and things now that she's out of office, but has never come to collect her good friend Barbara Ladine. I recall that she and Barbara Ladine and Barbara Olson, until she died, were great friends and known around Washington social scene as the three Barbaras. And I wonder whether someone like Barbara Comstock ever says, I guess if she was still in office, she'd had to be held accountable for it, but isn't. But whether she ever rolls her eyes and says, I don't know what happened to Barbara Ladine. But maybe we were all that crazy. But thankfully, I'm out now.
I just, for the heck of it, Googled Barbara Ladine and grabbed a Marcy Wheeler story, Empty Wheel, from just last week.
Yeah, she remembers that.
How she... Let's see, Mike Flynn lied to protect Barbara Ladine, who then fed disinformation to Sarah Carter. So Ladine was involved helping Mike Flynn on the whole Mueller report.
So anywhere she could be of assistance to a conspiracy theory, she did. And Chuck Grassley is, I'll just tweet about hitting deer with my car. I'm just an innocent bystander and all this.
Pigeons.
But, aw shucks. I employ the biggest conspiracy theorist, by volume that
she
the
really
Republican
has
Party's
her
ever
fingers
seen.
in everything.
Yeah. But maybe safely retired, but maybe not. Honestly,
we don't know.
That's not a good situation to be in when it comes to public payroll. Is she on it? Is she not on it? I don't know. But, in an era of Trump scale corruption, she probably skates, because who's going to chase down Barbara Ladine? But on the other hand, they're arresting people who, put up TikTok videos of themselves inside the Capitol, too. So maybe one day they'll get to her. Okay, so that's done. Unless there's further exploration of either that topic or the IRS topic, or what's on your mind these days. I'm going to
yes, it's about time they found the IRS.
Yes. That would be
helpful. I have been on that one for, since the Tea Party got them defunded.
Yes, we've been around
there is a lot of money sitting there on the table that the IRS really just doesn't have the capacity to go after.
Yeah.
So they do pick the low-hanging fruit, the poor people who can't afford lawyers to fight them.
Yeah, it's awful and got to be counterproductive in any number of ways, and not the least of it. I don't know if anybody's done a cost-benefit analysis, but I bet it probably does cost more per hour to, even without the legal fees, to chase these guys, to chase poorer taxpayers down, because there's just not a lot of dollars there. That's why they're poor. Not many dollars in their hands.
The larger issue is, again, this is one of the most front-facing of federal agencies, like the Social Security Administration. They're there dealing with the American public every day, and Republicans have made a concerted effort to destroy them,
Yeah.
to starve them, to make that job that much harder, to make people more angry at the IRS and Social Security because they can't get through, because they get the runaround, because they're left on hold forever.
Yeah.
It's been a real tactic to undermine people's faith in government.
Yes, that
and
long-term project
it's
too.
worked. And then this goes back to sort of a postal service kind of thing. There are still Trump people heading up the IRS,
Yes.
heading up Social Security, and of course then there's Louis DeJoy at the post office.
Yeah, all still waiting on action there.
So these are all, high priorities for the Biden administration, just in terms of good government, just in terms of restoring people's faith, just in terms of saving these institutions, getting these guys out and getting his guys in.
Right.
Or what?
And all part of the, the overall long-term project is just individual manifestations of, well, if you are campaigning on government can't solve problems, government can't do anything, an easy way to prove it is make it impossible for the government to accomplish anything. And that's what they're up to. So that's what they do.
Yeah. And also just allow these people to do their jobs. Give them software that isn't 40 years old.
That would help.
Although, on the other hand, systems might be more secure by being so obsolete.
Could be, right.
I don't know if modern-day hackers can hack COBOL systems.
That could be. You never know. I mean, things being hacked left and right. And I don't know. Has anybody ever spent any time trying to hack into the IRS? That's something where it would lead. I mean, probably people have tried it, but it is probably a low payoff just in terms of they're almost certainly going to prosecute you if you are detected, and I don't know what you can get out of it. Like, you can't draw money out of them. Hack the Treasury, I guess. Do that.
Yeah. It's a lot easier, I think, probably to hack credit card companies and private databases where they have all of your information anyway.
Yeah. See, they know the principle of who to go after. And people with money. The IRS is stuck going after the people that even hackers won't touch. Okay, that is an odd situation all by itself, and reminds me of the revelation yesterday that the hackers who attacked the Colonial Pipeline and caused the gas shortages in the southeast in the country apparently didn't even actually break or disrupt the pipeline itself. They just disrupted the financial systems. Yes, right. So they couldn't collect all their money, so they just said nobody's getting any gas until we get our money. So I'm not sure who the ransomware was planted by here.
Yeah.
I don't know if I get it. It seems like we were all held ransom by the company. And I don't know. I guess you're not supposed to cheer for ransomware hackers. They didn't help us any. But, man, I don't know. Their business model was no different.
That there wasn't any disruption to the pipelines. There wasn't any danger of disruption to the pipelines. That it wasn't a safety issue. It was nothing. It was that they weren't getting their payments.
Yeah,
is infuriating.
Yeah, we're really in the wrong place with that. But let's see if we can distract you with another shortage. Chick-fil-A sauce. That's the latest outrage.
What was that one about?
I don't know. I missed its development, but by the mid-afternoon, and it's not taken off, I don't think. But somewhat, I don't know. I don't know if there's any realistic anything behind it. Because I got to tell you, anytime I've ever seen Chick-fil-A distributed, the striking visual feature is how much sauce they give you when they do these things. I've been in places where they have, it's a community event and they cater it with Chick-fil-A sauce, or Chick-fil-A, and it's just the sauce. But, they have the little chicken nuggets out or the sandwiches and everything. And when they set you up with this, they give you a ton of this sauce. So that may be the shortage. But I don't know. Breitbart got wind of a story that one outlet, 10 outlets said they were short on sauce. They made it into a supply chain story, but worse than that, of course, they tried to make it into a this is the world Biden, now, thanks Biden, there's a Chick-fil-A sauce shortage. And there isn't, and it certainly wouldn't be Joe Biden's doing if there was, but that didn't stop. I think the governor of Oklahoma, is that Stitt in Oklahoma?
That's Stitt,
sent out a fundraising letter, re-elect me, I'll put an end to this sauce problem.
That's the one I saw.
Incredible.
The Stitt connection.
So I don't think that's really true, but whatever, something. But I guess they got tired of Dr. Seuss and Mr. Potato Head, so that's it. That's what we got to do. Not let's help people out with COVID. Let's get people working. Let's fix the infrastructure problems. How many bridges broke last week? I know I saw 2 cracking bridges stories.
The one on I-40 over the Mississippi, that crack was, that was big.
Yeah, the thing snapped.
That was a huge crack.
Yeah. No infrastructure problems. And I understand there was one in Iowa caused a train derailment in the last couple of days, too. By the way, just a train filled with fertilizer and ammonium nitrate. No biggie.
Okay. Yeah. But by all means, let's go chintzy on our infrastructure spending and do it on the back of user fees.
Oh, is that going to be the new route for funding?
Been the constant from Republicans.
Yeah.
Of course, they don't want any of their 2017 tax scam to go away. Mm-hmm. They want to keep that low rate for corporations, so they're going to fight that, and they say it can be done with public-private partnerships, grift.
Okay.
Or graft. I don't know which case. I think it's graft in that case, isn't it?
I don't know. It's a good question.
And user fees and the gas tax. Although they'll say they're opposed to the gas tax, but user fees is essentially the gas tax. So.
Yeah, okay. Well, millions of Southeastern Americans paid no gas tax last week. So.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks a lot, guys.
More fees for people who are trying to do the right thing by driving electric cars. So up the fees on electric car drivers because, we certainly can't tax fossil fuel companies.
No, can't have that. They'll shut down the pipelines on us. So
obviously,
I guess, right?
They'll use any excuse.
Yeah, it was finances, right? So how long until they say if you tax us, we're going to shut this off? I don't know.
I'm sure that's coming next.
Yeah. Try it.
The Biden administration is saying no, absolutely not. No taxes. When we say no taxes on people making it under $400,000, we mean it, and that includes user fees.
That's nice.
So where this goes with Manchin and Sinema doing their, we can't do this by budget reconciliation again, and we have to be bipartisan, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess they just are satisfied with the things not passing, I guess. That's bad news.
As near as I can see, and I can't read anybody's minds, but it seems like Biden is showing Manchin and Sinema that, he means it. He's going to do everything he can to engage Republicans, and they're not going to play, and so we're just going to have to do this. At least that's what it looks like from here.
Well, it makes as much sense as anything, because otherwise you just stand there staring at each other.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are about let's pressure the two of them or let's threaten the two of them, but I think it's pretty clear that they seem satisfied with their prospects if they were to dig in and lose out on a lot of things, perhaps for their state, but then campaign against that and I don't know, and say, I'm being punished for my political bravery and see if that works. Or you say, all right, well, tell you what, I'll try it your way. And if it doesn't work, will you then agree that, we should try a different way? It doesn't guarantee that they'll live up to that promise, even if they agree to it. But what else do you do?
I don't know what else you do.
So
I don't know how much more clearly Republicans can show their hands to these people.
True. Yeah. Sometimes people just need a personal demonstration.
I don't know, Kagro. I don't know. But but it's really quite discouraging. And even more discouraging is McCarthy coming out against the commission. The commission that he expressly gave John Katko to negotiate with Benny Thompson, the Democrat. He gave Katko what he wanted to see out of it. Katko used that in his negotiations. Mm-hmm. He achieved most of that, and now McCarthy's saying, nope, not going to vote for it. So that kind of, as far as I can see, dooms it getting passed in the Senate. It will pass in the House with Democratic votes, maybe a few Republicans, Liz Cheney.
If they let her vote.
And Katko, and Kissinger, and Upton.
Probably good guess.
But not enough to get 10 votes in the Senate, I don't think.
Yeah, I imagine it could be doomed there, which, I mean, I don't know how much hope I held out for this particular commission, but
no, it got watered down to the extent that, well, what probably would have been a smarter way to go for McCarthy was to let it pass, for McConnell to let it pass, but then on the back end sabotage it, which they had laid the groundwork to do. McConnell and McCarthy would appoint the vice chair. The vice chair of the commission would have the ability to veto any subpoenas the chair tried to put forward. I mean, it really was set up to be hamstrung by Republicans already.
Yes, otherwise they wouldn't agree.
Yeah. So the fact that McCarthy decided to just go ahead and kill it now is interesting to me. Maybe he was getting pressure from Trump. I don't know.
Could be. Yeah, or he found out how much. Maybe he got a ruling from the House Administration or Ethics Committee saying, no, you would have to pay yourself out of pocket for the lawyers if you wanted to fight the subpoenas. It wouldn't be House funds used to fight them. Oh, well, then I'll oppose it now as opposed to later. Okay.
Or, that's a possibility. The threat sort of veiled from Cheney that, he's got to testify and he would probably be subpoenaed if necessary. True. Perhaps he just wanted to avoid that.
Could be. Yeah, I wonder.
But politically, I think it would have made more sense for him to keep his mouth shut, let it pass, let McConnell figure out how to sabotage it. I mean, there are so many ways they could. The commission deadline in the legislation was still the end of this year. So, half of the year's gone already by the time they got the thing together. They'd have 3-4 months. McConnell could drag out the naming of his commission members. Right. He and McCarthy both could drag out the naming of the Republicans on it for as long as they wanted. None of that was specified in the legislation, no deadlines.
That's bad. Yeah, that's really, the sort of thing that screws it up.
I'm curious as to why he had to come out with this today saying, no, we've got to kill this thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe that will be revealed in further probing of the situation. Somebody will speak off the record and say why it was, but that's another good point.
So I would like to see why. Yeah. I would like some Republican to stand up and say, this is what's going on inside our caucus.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hold my breath.
Like, maybe Katko. I mean, I don't think that he would necessarily speak out on it yet.
He's feel pretty betrayed.
Yeah, you'd think he'd want to
explain this. Because he was doing what McCarthy told him to do.
Yeah.
And he just got stabbed in the back.
And that would be part of the interesting parallel to the investigation. You said you said this thing about the insurrection immediately afterwards, but then you changed your tune on it. You said you talked to Trump.
I've lost you. You're breaking up.
Oh, dear. Well, I'm not heading into a tunnel. I know that.
I missed most of that. Somehow you broke up and I didn't hear that.
Oh, okay. Am I back now for you? I think. Oh, I don't know. We had this problem.
Inconsistently.
Okay.
Inconsistently.
We had this problem yesterday briefly for some reason with Greg, and he hung up and called back. Maybe that would help. I hate to have to do it that way, but if it's still breaking up, maybe we will.
It sounds like I have you now.
Okay,
so.
Well, good. Then we'll just stick with it that way. I'm curious about whether or not I'd love to find the story, and it would be more of the same, I guess, from McCarthy, saying one thing immediately following the insurrection and then changing his tune. Having the report came out. What was the member of Congress, the Republican woman who I guess first brought to our attention the nature of the conversation between Trump and McCarthy on January 6th, right?
It was Jamie Herrera Butler, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. And and I guess that's what he would perhaps be called to testify about. But again, so changed his story about the insurrection itself, changed his story about the nature of his conversation, changed the story about what he's asked Katko to do. Katko does this thing and negotiates it just as instructed, and he still walks away. There's a lot that needs to be explained, and it may just be that it never gets explained. Kevin McCarthy, he's just not a figure that people have required explanations from, because he's just not an intellectual powerhouse. It's never seemed like he's really driving the Republican agenda, that he knows what's going on. So
there's
the press
two
is not
people
interested.
I think Putin pays.
Yeah, right. I mean, boy, he too, for different reasons. Like Ladine schemes to put herself in the center of every controversy. McCarthy just stumbles into everyone, I think. But yeah, he puts himself in the middle of everything and like can't extricate himself from it either. And that too, just a pet peeve of mine, because everybody sort of focused on that. And to me, during the first impeachment, I was, begging everybody to say, remember that this discussion wasn't really about Putin paying anybody. He just sort of out of nowhere brought it to that. And that's suspicious and all for good reason. But the discussion was about the deviousness with which the Russians were manipulating Ukrainian politics, and the early warning that Ukrainian electeds were trying to give the United States and the rest of the world about the nature of Russian interference in Western-style democracies. And McCarthy missed the whole thing and was basically saying, one time I went to golf with Trump and I seen his butt in the locker room. That had nothing to do with anything. But it did mention Putin, so that made headlines, whereas Trump's butt probably wouldn't have.
Probably.
Although, you never know.
You never know. I guess it depends on... But yes, you're absolutely right.
Very huge, beautiful
the whole context of that conversation was chilling.
Yeah.
Considering it was in June of 2016 and we were right in the middle of Russia interfering in the democratic process of our elections.
Right. And that they had that revealed to them and some of them didn't understand it, and some of them said, it just dawned on me, and now we have to hide it.
Yeah. And fast forward to 2021 and here we are. So much for democracy.
Yes, and unlikely
if you're
to get
a Republican.
Any right. That story continues, and it continues on Capitol Hill in the form of the commission story, which you've covered, and I guess we'll have more to say about. I don't know whether you're going to have.
Well, in the larger context of the big lie.
Yes. It continues. And, I hope there's some more information about it, because we'd love to see you be able to, carry that story forward. But I guess it depends on somebody going on, if not on the record, then speaking anonymously about what's driving McCarthy's decision to abandon this deal on the commission. I don't know.
I hope somebody talks.
Hope so. If not, where else do you turn today? What anything else on your plate that we should be looking out for later in the day?
More on infrastructure. We don't know where that is. And as always, let's reform the Supreme Court.
Oh, that too. Okay, yes, and now that back on everybody's mind because of the caseload that they're taking on. And that too will, I'm sure.
And that Affordable Care Act case that's still hanging out there.
That I didn't even think about it. My mind turned to the Roe v. Wade challenges and your special relationship with Susan Collins, who, of course, got herself reelected by promising that this wouldn't happen. So, okay. Well, maybe now, now you've got something to talk about. We exhausted all of my own topics, but there's plenty more. Thanks again, Joan, and I bet by the time we speak next week, if all goes well, we'll have covered all of those things, and we can get some answers about them.
Maybe some.
Yeah. Right. Well, we can stretch this out forever, too. Thanks a lot, Joan. We'll talk with you again next week. Time now for us to give up the ghost and hand the microphone over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, what comes up next? Well, let's see. 30 House Republicans introduced legislation that would prevent the federal government from fighting racism, sexism, and gender discrimination. Sounds right in line with the rest of their program. We'll find out exactly what that's all about and what their excuse is it, among other things, next with Justice Putnam.